Marcus wheeled his chair through the busy downtown streets, his calloused hands gripping the worn rubber wheels. The summer heat made his shirt stick to his back as he navigated between hurried pedestrians who barely glanced his way. 3 years had passed since the construction accident that crushed his spine, and he had grown used to being invisible in a world that moved on 2 legs. The small cardboard sign propped against his lap read, "Homeless veteran, anything helps," in black marker that had faded from countless rainy days. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him that his last meal had been yesterday morning when a kind stranger bought him a breakfast sandwich. The few coins in his cup wouldn't even buy a candy bar. As the lunch crowd began to thin, Marcus noticed an unusual commotion near the old subway entrance. A small group had gathered around someone, their voices carrying a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Wheeling closer, he could see an elderly woman sitting cross-legged on a colorful blanket. Her dark skin was weathered like old leather, and her eyes held a depth that seemed to look right through people. She wore simple clothes that looked handmade, with intricate patterns embroidered along the edges. Around her neck hung multiple necklaces made of beads, stones, and what appeared to be small bones. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, secured with wooden pins. Despite her humble appearance, there was something commanding about her presence that made people stop and listen. "I can heal what doctors cannot," she was saying to a middle-aged man who held his bandaged wrist close to his chest. "But healing requires trust, and trust requires sacrifice. What are you willing to give up to be whole again?" The man laughed nervously and walked away, shaking his head. Several others in the small crowd began to disperse, muttering about crazy old ladies and street scams. Marcus found himself rolling closer, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. The woman's eyes suddenly locked onto his, and he felt a strange chill despite the summer heat. She smiled, revealing teeth that were surprisingly white and straight. "Young man in the chair," she called out, her accent thick and unfamiliar. "Come closer. Let Mama Esther look at you." Marcus hesitated. He had encountered plenty of street performers and self-proclaimed healers over the years. Most were harmless entertainment, but some were con artists looking to take advantage of desperate people. Still, something about this woman felt different. Maybe it was the hunger making him lightheaded, or maybe it was the way she looked at him like she could see his whole story written on his face. He wheeled closer until he was just a few feet from her blanket. Up close, he could see that her eyes were an unusual shade of amber, almost golden in the sunlight. The scent of herbs and something earthier, like rich soil after rain, seemed to surround her. "What happened to your legs, child?" she asked gently, though her voice carried an authority that made the question feel less like curiosity and more like a diagnosis. "Construction accident," Marcus replied, his voice hoarse from not speaking much lately. "Steel beam fell. Crushed my spine. Doctor said I'll never walk again." Mama Esther nodded slowly as if she had expected this answer. "Doctors see only what they know. They look at broken bones and damaged nerves, but they don't see the spirit. They don't understand that sometimes the body breaks because the soul needs to learn something new." Marcus couldn't help but snort. "Lady, no offense, but I've heard every spiritual explanation in the book. Bad karma, life lessons, God's plan. None of it changes the fact that I can't feel anything below my waist." "You mock what you don't understand," she said, but her tone wasn't angry. If anything, she sounded amused. "Tell me, when did you last eat a real meal?" The sudden change of topic caught him off guard.
"Yesterday morning, I think."
"Maybe the day before. Time kind of blurs together when you're living on the street." Mama Esther reached into a worn leather bag beside her and pulled out what looked like a small cloth bundle. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing flatbread that still looked fresh and warm. The smell hit Marcus immediately, making his mouth water and his stomach clench with desperate hunger. "I will make you a deal," she said, tearing the bread into pieces. "You give me 1 week of your time. Come here every day at sunset and I will feed you every evening. Good food, not scraps. In return, you let me try to heal your legs." Marcus stared at the bread in her hands. His practical mind screamed that this was probably a scam, that desperate people were easy targets for false hope. But his empty stomach and the genuine warmth in her eyes made him hesitate. "What's the catch?" he asked. "What do you really want?" "No catch," she replied, offering him a piece of the bread. "Just your willingness to believe that impossible things sometimes happen when we least expect them. Your willingness to trust someone who has nothing to gain from lying to you." Marcus took the bread with trembling hands. It was still warm and tasted better than anything he could remember eating. As he chewed, he studied her face for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. All he saw was patience and something that might have been sadness. "People think I'm crazy," he said after swallowing. "They see a homeless guy in a wheelchair talking to some lady with magic healing powers. They're going to think we're both nuts." "Let them think what they want," Mama Esther shrugged. "What matters is what you think. What matters is whether you're ready to take a chance on something that might change everything, or whether you'd rather stay safe in your suffering." Marcus finished the bread in silence, his mind racing. Logic told him to roll away and forget this conversation ever happened. But something deeper, something that had been quiet for 3 long years, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this strange woman with golden eyes might be exactly what he had given up hoping for. "1 week?" he asked. "1 week," she confirmed. 7 sunsets. 7 chances to discover what you're really capable of. Marcus looked around at the mostly empty street, then back at Mama Esther's expectant face. He thought about another night of searching for a safe place to sleep. Another day of begging for enough change to buy a meal. Another year of watching the world move past him like he was a piece of broken furniture. "All right," he heard himself saying. 1 week. But if this is some kind of con game, I'll make sure everyone in this neighborhood knows about it." Mama Esther smiled, and for just a moment, Marcus could have sworn he saw something that looked like starlight flickering in her amber eyes. The next evening, Marcus found himself returning to the subway entrance despite spending most of the day trying to talk himself out of it. He had convinced himself he was only coming back for the food, not because he believed in any supernatural healing nonsense. A man had to eat, and if some eccentric old lady wanted to feed him in exchange for sitting through her mystical mumbo-jumbo, that seemed like a fair trade. Mama Esther was already there when he arrived, sitting in the exact same spot on her colorful blanket. This time, however, she had several small clay pots arranged around her, each one emitting different scents that Marcus couldn't identify. Some smelled like flowers, others like spices he had never encountered, and one had an earthy, almost metallic odor that made his nose wrinkle. "You came back," she said without looking up from whatever she was preparing in one of the pots. "I wondered if you would." "Yeah, well, you promised food," Marcus replied, trying to keep his tone casual. "I'm a simple man with simple needs." Mama Esther chuckled softly. "Simple needs, perhaps, but nothing simple about the man." She finally looked up at him, those unsettling amber eyes seeming to peer right into his soul. "Tell me about before the accident. What kind of life did you have?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his wheelchair. He didn't like talking about the before times when he had been a different person entirely. "What does that matter? That guy is gone." "Nothing is ever truly gone," she said, stirring one of the pots with a wooden stick that looked hand-carved. "Energy changes form, but it never disappears. The man you were before is still inside you, just sleeping. We need to wake him up before we can fix what's broken." "Look, lady," Marcus began, his frustration building. "I didn't come here for therapy. You said you could heal my legs. Either you can or you can't, but I don't need some amateur psychology session." Instead of being offended, Mama Esther smiled, spoken like a man who built things with his hands. Direct, practical, no patience for what he sees as nonsense. She pulled a small leather pouch from her bag and sprinkled something that looked like crushed leaves into one of the pots. "You were a construction foreman, weren't you? Used to being in charge, used to solving problems with tools and hard work." Marcus stared at her. He had never mentioned his job, and there was nothing about his current appearance that would suggest his former profession. "How did you know that?" "The same way I know you have a daughter you haven't spoken to in 2 years, she said calmly, still stirring the pot. "The same way I know you lie awake at night wondering if she thinks about you, if she knows you're not the man who raised her anymore." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His daughter Sarah was the one topic he refused to let himself think about, the one wound that never seemed to heal no matter how much time passed. "Stop," he said quietly. "The same way I know you blame yourself for the accident," Mama Esther continued, seemingly unaware of his distress. "Even though the safety inspection was someone else's responsibility. Even though you warned them about the crane's stability issues weeks before it happened, I said stop." Marcus's voice was louder now, drawing curious glances from a few passers-by. Mama Esther finally looked up at him, and her expression had changed completely. The gentle, almost grandmotherly demeanor was gone, replaced by something ancient and powerful that made Marcus's skin crawl with goosebumps. "You cannot heal what you refuse to face," she said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to echo off the surrounding buildings. "Your legs are not broken because of the accident, Marcus Williams. Your legs are broken because you decided you deserved to be broken. You chose to see yourself as less than whole, so your body obliged." "That's the biggest load of garbage I've ever heard," Marcus shot back, but his voice cracked slightly. "I didn't choose to have a steel beam crush my spine. I didn't choose to lose everything I cared about." "No," Mama Esther agreed, lifting one of the clay pots and holding it out to him. "But you chose what to do afterward. You chose to disappear instead of fighting. You chose to become invisible instead of adapting. You chose to let your guilt about Sarah eat you alive instead of trying to rebuild your relationship with her." The pot in her hands contained a thick, dark liquid that steamed despite the evening heat. The smell was overwhelming, herbs and spices, mixed with something that reminded Marcus of thunderstorms and rich earth. "Drink this," she commanded. Marcus looked at the strange concoction and then back at her face. Every rational part of his mind screamed warnings about accepting mystery liquids from strangers, especially ones who seemed to know impossible things about his past. "What is it?" he asked. "Medicine," she replied simply. "But not for your legs, not yet. This is for the poison you've been carrying in your heart, the guilt, the shame, the anger that's been eating you from the inside out. We have to clean that out before we can start rebuilding what's broken." "And if I refuse?" Mama Esther shrugged. "Then you go hungry tonight and we stop pretending this is about healing your legs. You can roll away and continue feeling sorry for yourself until you die, bitter and alone in whatever alley you call home." The harsh words stung because they were true. Marcus knew he had been slowly giving up, piece by piece, day by day. The accident had taken his mobility, but he had chosen to let it take everything else too. His job, his friends, his relationship with Sarah, his sense of purpose, all of it sacrificed on the altar of his own self-pity. He reached for the pot with shaking hands. The clay was warm against his palms, and the liquid inside seemed to swirl even though he wasn't moving it. What if it doesn't work? What if nothing changes? Then at least you'll know you tried, Mama Esther said gently, the harsh authority fading from her voice. And sometimes just the act of trying is enough to start something bigger than we ever imagined. Marcus brought the pot to his lips. The liquid was bitter and sweet at the same time, with an aftertaste that seemed to change every few seconds. As he drank, he felt warmth spreading through his chest. Not physical heat, but something deeper, like hope cautiously awakening after a long hibernation. When he finished, Mama Esther took the empty pot and set it aside. "Now we begin the real work," she said, reaching for another leather pouch. "Tomorrow you will call your daughter. Tonight you will remember who you used to be before you decided you weren't worth saving." As she spoke, Marcus felt something shifting inside him, some rusty door in his heart creaking open for the first time in years. He didn't know if what he was feeling was magic or psychology, or just the placebo effect of wanting desperately to believe in something. All he knew was that for the first time since the accident, he felt like maybe, just maybe, there might be a future worth fighting for. "What happens if I can't reach her?" he asked. "What if she doesn't want to talk to me?" Mama Esther was already packing up her clay pots, her movements efficient and purposeful. "Then you try again the next day and the day after that until you remember that love doesn't disappear just because we stop expressing it. Your daughter is still there, Marcus. The question is whether you're brave enough to let her know you are too." Marcus spent the entire next day staring at the cracked screen of his old flip phone, Sarah's number glowing in the dim display. He had memorized it years ago, back when he called her every weekend to hear about school and friends and all the small dramas that seemed so important when you were 16. Now she was 19, probably in college, probably living a life he knew nothing about. He must have started to dial a dozen times, only to snap the phone shut before the call could connect. What would he even say? "Sorry I vanished after the accident? Sorry I was too proud to let you see me weak? Sorry I chose to disappear rather than figure out how to be your father from a wheelchair?" By evening, his stomach was growling again, and he found himself rolling back toward the subway entrance with the phone still clutched in his sweaty palm. Mama Esther was waiting for him, but this time she wasn't alone. A young woman sat beside her on the colorful blanket, her dark hair braided with small bells that chimed softly when she moved. "This is my granddaughter Keisha," Mama Esther said as Marcus approached. She's been helping me prepare for tonight's session. Keisha looked up from the bundle of herbs she was sorting and smiled. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with the same penetrating amber eyes as her grandmother but a softer, more modern energy about her. "Grandmama told me about you," she said. "She says you're stuck between worlds." "Between worlds?" Marcus repeated, not sure if he should be offended or intrigued. "You're not who you used to be, but you haven't figured out who you are now," Keisha explained, setting aside the herbs. "So you're just floating in between, not really living in either place." Mama Esther gestured for Marcus to come closer. "Did you call your daughter?" Marcus held up the phone, his face flushing with embarrassment. "I tried. I kept starting to dial, but I couldn't go through with it. What if she hangs up? What if she tells me she never wants to see me again? What if she's been waiting by her phone for 2 years, hoping you would call?" Keisha asked quietly. "What if she thinks you don't love her anymore because you disappeared without explanation?" The possibility hit Marcus harder than he expected. He had been so focused on his own shame and fear that he hadn't really considered what his silence might have done to Sarah. In his mind, he had been protecting her from having to deal with his problems. But maybe what felt like protection to him felt like abandonment to her. "Here," Mama Esther said, handing him another of her mysterious clay pots. This one contained a liquid that was lighter in color than the previous night's concoction, with a smell that reminded him of his mother's garden. "Drink this first. It will give you courage." Marcus hesitated. "What exactly are you giving me? Some kind of herbal medication? I need to know what I'm putting in my body." Keisha laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Grandmama's recipes are mostly common herbs and a lot of intention. Chamomile for calming, ginseng for energy, passion flower for anxiety. The real magic isn't in the ingredients, it's in deciding to trust the process." "The process of what?" Marcus asked, but he was already lifting the pot to his lips. Whatever was in it tasted like honey and mint with something earthy underneath. "The process of remembering that you're stronger than your circumstances," Mama Esther replied. "The process of choosing connection over isolation, growth over stagnation, love over fear." As the liquid warmed his stomach, Marcus felt some of the tension in his shoulders begin to relax. It might have been psychological, but he didn't care. For the first time in days, his mind felt clear enough to think beyond his own anxiety. "Okay," he said, opening his phone again. "I'm going to call her. But if this goes badly, I'm blaming both of you." Keisha grinned. "Fair enough. But if it goes well, you have to promise to keep trying, even when it gets difficult." Marcus nodded and dialed Sarah's number before he could change his mind again. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. He was starting to think it would go to voicemail when a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. Sarah's voice sounded older, more mature than he remembered, but it was definitely her. His throat felt thick with emotion as he struggled to find words. "Sarah, it's Dad." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity. Marcus could hear traffic in the background and realized she must be walking somewhere, living her life in a world that had moved on without him. "Dad?" Her voice was careful, guarded. "Where are you? I've been trying to find you for months. The hospital said you were discharged, but nobody knew where you went." The words hit him like a physical blow. She had been looking for him? All this time he had assumed she was better off without him, and she had been searching? "I'm sorry," he managed to say, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, baby girl. I thought you'd be better off if I just disappeared for a while." "Better off?" Sarah's voice rose with a mixture of anger and hurt. "Dad, you had an accident and then you just vanished. I didn't know if you were alive or dead. How could that possibly be better for me?" Mama Esther reached over and placed a weathered hand on Marcus's arm, her touch somehow grounding him in the moment. He looked at her amber eyes and saw encouragement there, a reminder that this conversation was exactly what needed to happen. "You're right," he said into the phone. "I was scared and hurt, and I made terrible decisions. I thought being in a wheelchair made me less than the father you deserved. I thought I would just be a burden." "A burden?" Sarah's voice softened slightly. "Dad, you taught me how to change a tire when I was 12. You showed up to every school play and soccer game, even when you were exhausted from work. You think a wheelchair would change any of that?" Marcus felt tears starting to flow down his cheeks. "I don't know how to be a father from this chair, Sarah. I don't know how to be the man who protected you and provided for you when I can barely take care of myself." "Then learn," she said simply. We'll figure it out together. That's what families do, they adapt. But you have to stop running away from the people who love you. Keisha was smiling at him now, and he realized that both women had been listening to every word. Instead of feeling embarrassed, he felt supported, like he had a team helping him through this crucial moment. Where are you living? Sarah asked. Can I come see you? Marcus looked around at the street corner that had become his temporary meeting place, then at his own unwashed clothes and unkempt appearance. I'm between places right now. Can I call you back in a few days when I get things sorted out? Don't you dare disappear on me again, Sarah said firmly, and he could hear their father-daughter dynamic reasserting itself despite the years of separation. Give me your number and promise me you'll answer when I call. Marcus gave her the number and made the promise, meaning it completely. As he hung up the phone, he realized that something fundamental had shifted inside him. The crushing weight of guilt and shame that he had carried for so long felt lighter, more manageable. How do you feel? Mama Esther asked. Different, Marcus admitted. Like maybe I'm not completely broken after all. Good, she said, beginning to pack up her clay pots. Tomorrow we work on your legs. But first we had to fix what was really broken. As Marcus wheeled away that night, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope for the future. The third evening brought an unexpected change in routine. When Marcus arrived at their usual meeting spot, he found Mama Esther standing upright for the first time since he'd known her. She was taller than he had expected, with perfect posture that belied her apparent age. More surprising still, she had cleared away the colorful blanket and clay pots, replacing them with what looked like a small camping chair. Tonight we work differently, she announced as he approached. Tonight you get out of that wheelchair. Marcus felt his stomach drop. What do you mean, get out? I can't feel my legs, remember? I can't stand up. Your legs work fine, Mama Esther said matter-of-factly, setting up the camping chair a few feet away from where he had stopped. Your brain just forgot how to talk to them. We're going to remind it. Keisha emerged from behind a nearby pillar, carrying what appeared to be several long strips of cloth and a bottle of oil that gleamed amber in the streetlight. Grandmama's been doing this for 40 years, she said cheerfully. She's never had anyone walk away disappointed. Walk away being the operative phrase, Marcus muttered, but he could feel his heart beginning to race with something that might have been excitement. Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I've been to physical therapy. I've seen specialists. My spinal cord is damaged. This isn't a matter of forgetting. The nerve pathways are literally broken. Mama Esther moved behind his wheelchair and, without warning, placed her hands on his shoulders. Her touch was warm, almost hot, and he felt an odd tingling sensation that seemed to radiate down his spine. Western medicine sees the body as a machine, she said, her voice taking on that strange, authoritative tone he had heard before. Broken parts get replaced or written off as unfixable, but the body is not a machine, Marcus. It's a river. Rivers can be dammed, but they always find a way to flow if you give them a new path. The tingling sensation was getting stronger, spreading through his torso in ways that didn't seem possible. Marcus had grown accustomed to the complete absence of sensation below his waist, but now he was feeling something. Not quite normal feeling, but definitely something. This is impossible, he whispered, more to himself than to either of the women. Good, Keisha said, kneeling down beside his wheelchair. Impossible is where Grandmama works best. Now we're going to need you to trust us completely. Can you do that? Marcus looked back and forth between the two faces, watching him expectantly. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this was delusion, that desperate people were capable of convincing themselves of anything. But the tingling in his spine was undeniable, and for the first time in 3 years he thought he might have felt something in his left foot. What do you need me to do? He heard himself asking. Mama Esther smiled, and Marcus noticed that her teeth seemed to gleam with their own inner light. First, we're going to move you to the chair. Keisha will help support your weight while I work on re-establishing the connections that trauma has disrupted. The process of transferring from his wheelchair to the camping chair was awkward and frightening. Marcus had to rely completely on Keisha's strength and guidance, feeling helpless in a way that reminded him of his worst days in the hospital. But once he was settled in the new chair, something remarkable happened. Mama Esther began massaging his legs with the amber oil, and Marcus could swear he felt pressure, warmth, even something that might have been the beginning of actual sensation. She worked in silence for several minutes, her hands moving with practiced confidence over muscles that had been dormant for years. "Tell me what you feel," she instructed. "I don't know," Marcus admitted, his voice shaky with amazement. "Something. It's not normal feeling, but it's definitely something. Like static electricity or pins and needles, but deeper." Keisha was wrapping the cloth strips around his legs in intricate patterns, each wrap seeming to intensify whatever was happening in his nervous system. The fabric felt rough against skin that shouldn't have been able to feel anything at all. "Your body remembers how to work," Mama Esther explained as she continued her massage. "The accident created scar tissue that blocked the signals, but the pathways are still there. We're just clearing the blockage." "This isn't medically possible," Marcus protested, even as he watched his right foot twitch slightly when she pressed a particular spot on his thigh. "You can't just massage away spinal cord damage." "Medical possibility is limited by medical understanding," she replied calmly. "There are healing traditions older than any hospital, techniques that work with energy and intention as much as with physical manipulation. Your doctors did what they knew how to do. I'm doing what I know how to do." As the session continued, Marcus found himself experiencing sensations he had convinced himself he would never feel again. Nothing like normal sensation, but definitely something more than the complete numbness he had grown accustomed to. It was as if his legs were slowly waking up from a very long sleep. "Now," Mama Esther said after what felt like hours, "we try standing." Marcus felt a surge of panic. "I can't stand. I don't have the muscle strength even if the nerves were working." "Muscle strength can be rebuilt," Keisha said, positioning herself on his right side while her grandmother took his left. "But first we have to prove to your brain that standing is possible." Together they helped him rise from the chair. Marcus had expected to simply collapse, his legs buckling under weight they were no longer trained to support. Instead he found himself upright, wobbling but vertical, his legs somehow bearing his weight even though he couldn't quite understand how. "This is impossible," he breathed, staring down at his feet planted firmly on the concrete sidewalk. "Stop saying that word," Mama Esther commanded. "Impossible is just another word for unexpected. Your legs are holding you up right now. That's not impossible, that's happening." Marcus stood there for nearly 10 minutes supported by the two women but definitely standing on his own 2 feet. The sensation was overwhelming, not just physical but emotional. For 3 years he had defined himself by his inability to stand, and now here he was, vertical again. When they finally helped him back into his wheelchair, his legs were shaking with exhaustion, but he was grinning from ear to ear. "How did you do that?" "What just happened?" "We reminded your body how to be whole," Mama Esther said simply, beginning to pack up the oil and cloth strips. "Tomorrow we'll work on taking steps, but tonight you need to rest and let your nervous system process what just occurred." As Marcus rolled away from their meeting spot that evening, he kept looking down at his legs with new eyes. They weren't magically healed. He still couldn't feel them properly, still couldn't stand without help. But something fundamental had changed. The possibility of healing, which had seemed like a cruel fantasy just days before, now felt like it might actually be within reach. His phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation. I love you no matter what. Can't wait to see you soon." For the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt like the man who might be worthy of that love was starting to emerge from the ruins of his old life. He had stood on his own 2 feet tonight. Tomorrow, maybe he would take a step. Marcus arrived early for the 4th evening session, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and terror. He had spent the entire day obsessing over what had happened the night before, alternating between excitement and the creeping fear that it had all been some kind of hallucination, brought on by desperation and strange herbal concoctions. But the muscle soreness in his legs was real. He could feel it, actual genuine sensation in muscles that had been dormant for 3 years. When he shifted position in his wheelchair, he could sense the movement in ways that seemed impossible just a week ago. Mama Esther and Keisha were already waiting for him, but tonight they had brought additional equipment. There were 2 metal rails set up parallel to each other, creating a narrow walkway about 10 feet long. It looked like the parallel bars he remembered from physical therapy, but these seemed older, handmade with intricate carvings along their length. "Tonight, you walk," Mama Esther announced without preamble. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. "I don't think I'm ready for that." Last night was amazing, but standing for a few minutes is very different from actually walking. Ready is a luxury we don't have, she replied, already mixing something in one of her clay pots. Your daughter is coming to see you tomorrow. Do you want to meet her sitting in that chair? Or do you want to show her that impossible things happen when we stop limiting ourselves? The words hit Marcus like a cold splash of water. Sarah's coming tomorrow? How do you know that? Keisha smiled and held up a cell phone. She called me this afternoon. Asked if I knew how to reach you. Apparently you gave her my number instead of yours last night. Marcus checked his phone and realized she was right. In his emotional state during the call, he had accidentally given Sarah Keisha's number. What did you tell her? That her father was working very hard to become the man he wanted to be, Keisha replied. And that she should meet us here tomorrow at sunset to see the results of that work. The pressure was overwhelming. Marcus had imagined having weeks, maybe months, to figure out how to reconnect with Sarah, while still adjusting to his disability. The idea of seeing her tomorrow, possibly while attempting to walk for the first time in 3 years, felt like too much to handle. I can't, he said, backing his wheelchair away from the parallel bars. This is moving too fast. What if I fall? What if I can't do it and she has to watch me fail? Mama Esther stepped directly in front of his wheelchair, blocking his retreat. And what if you can do it and she gets to watch her father refuse to give up? What if she gets to see that love is stronger than fear? That healing is possible even when it seems hopeless? But what if I'm not actually healing? Marcus asked, voicing his deepest fear. What if this is all psychological or some kind of placebo effect? What if I'm just desperate enough to imagine sensations that aren't really there? Does it matter? Keisha asked gently. If your legs work, does it matter why they work? If you can walk to your daughter and hug her while standing up, does it matter whether it's science or magic or just the power of refusing to stay broken? Mama Esther was already preparing her oils and cloth strips. The difference between healing and miracle is just a matter of understanding, she said. Your Western doctors understand broken bones and damaged nerves. I understand broken spirits and blocked energy. Your legs were never the problem, Marcus. Your heart was the problem. Fix the heart, and the body follows. Despite his fears, Marcus found himself allowing them to help him from his wheelchair to the beginning of the parallel bars. The transfer was easier tonight, his legs seeming more responsive to his attempts to position them. Once he was standing with his hands gripping the rails, Mama Esther began her massage routine, while Keisha wrapped the cloth strips around his legs in new, more complex patterns. Tonight we're using different herbs, Mama Esther explained as she worked. Stronger ones. Plants that have been growing in sacred places charged with intention and possibility. The oil felt different against his skin, warmer, almost electric. As she massaged, Marcus could feel sensation spreading through his legs in ways that seemed to bypass his rational understanding. It wasn't normal feeling, but it was definitely real. Definitely something his nervous system was registering and responding to. Now, she said, positioning herself at his left side while Keisha took his right. We're going to take a step. Just one. Don't think about it. Don't analyze it. Just trust your body to remember what it knows how to do. Marcus gripped the parallel bars so tightly his knuckles went white. I don't know how to make my legs move. You don't make them move, Mama Esther corrected. You allow them to move. You stop telling them they can't and you let them show you what they remember. Taking a deep breath, Marcus tried to shift his weight forward. To his amazement, his right leg actually responded, lifting slightly and moving forward about 6 inches before settling back down. It wasn't a normal step. It was shaky and uncertain, but it was definitely a step. Did that just happen? He whispered, staring down at his foot. That just happened, Keisha confirmed, grinning broadly. Now do it again. The next step was easier, and the one after that easier still. By the end of the session, Marcus had walked the entire length of the parallel bars twice, slowly and with support, but definitely walking. His legs were trembling with exhaustion by the time they helped him back to his wheelchair. But he felt more alive than he had in years. Tomorrow, Mama Esther said as they packed up the equipment, you're going to walk to your daughter without any support. You're going to stand up from that wheelchair and walk to her on your own 2 feet. The idea was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. What if I can't do it without the parallel bars? What if I fall in front of her? Then you get back up, she said simply, and you try again. That's what fathers do. They show their children that falling down isn't the end of the story. As Marcus made his way home that night, he kept replaying the sensation of walking, the incredible feeling of his legs responding to his will. He had no idea how Mama Esther was accomplishing what trained medical professionals had told him was impossible. All he knew was that tomorrow, he would have the chance to hug his daughter while standing on his own 2 feet. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus fell asleep thinking about the future instead of mourning the past. Whatever was happening to him, whether it was medicine or magic or simply the power of refusing to accept limitations, it was real, and it was giving him back the life he thought he had lost forever. Tomorrow, Sarah would see her father walk again. Tomorrow, everything would change. The final evening arrived with Marcus feeling more nervous than he had for any job interview or first date in his entire life. He had spent the day at a local shelter, using their shower facilities and trying to make himself presentable for Sarah's visit. He had even managed to find clean clothes at a thrift store, using the last of his spare change to buy a button-down shirt that didn't quite fit, but at least looked respectable. As he wheeled toward the subway entrance, Marcus kept practicing what he would say to his daughter. 3 years of silence couldn't be explained in a few sentences, but he hoped that his actions tonight would speak louder than any words. Sarah was already there when he arrived, standing near the entrance with her arms crossed and an expression that mixed hope with careful guardedness. She looked so much older than his memories, with longer hair and a mature way of carrying herself that reminded him achingly of her mother. But her eyes were the same, dark and intelligent, missing nothing. "Dad," she said simply as he approached, and the single word carried 3 years' worth of hurt and love and complicated emotions. "Hey, baby girl," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You look beautiful. You look so grown up." Mama Esther and Keisha were setting up their usual equipment nearby, but they moved with quiet efficiency that kept them in the background. Marcus noticed that tonight they had brought what looked like a small crowd of supporters, other people from the neighborhood who had apparently heard about what was happening and wanted to witness it. "Keisha told me, you've been working with her grandmother," Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. "She said you've been getting better." Marcus wasn't sure how to explain what had been happening to him over the past week. How do you tell someone that you've been drinking mysterious herbal concoctions and having your legs massaged with oils that seem to carry their own electrical current? How do you describe the feeling of nerves reconnecting, of sensation returning to places that had been dead for years? "I've been learning some things," he said carefully. "Learning that maybe the doctors didn't know everything. Learning that healing sometimes happens in ways that don't fit into medical textbooks." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "I've been learning some things too, like how to track down missing fathers who think they're protecting their daughters by disappearing." Before Marcus could respond, Mama Esther approached them. She had changed out of her usual simple clothes into something that looked more ceremonial. A long dress with intricate beadwork and symbols that seemed to shift in the streetlight. "Sarah," she said, extending her hand. "I am Mama Esther. Your father has been my student this week. Tonight he graduates." Sarah shook the offered hand, looking puzzled. "Graduates from what?" "From believing that broken things can't be fixed," Mama Esther replied. "From thinking that love isn't stronger than fear. From accepting limitations that exist only in his mind." The small crowd that had gathered was creating a loose circle around them, and Marcus realized that this had become something much larger than a private reunion. Word had somehow spread through the neighborhood about the homeless veteran who was learning to walk again, and people had come to witness what they hoped would be a miracle. "Dad," Sarah said quietly, moving closer to his wheelchair. "What's going on? What are all these people doing here?" Marcus took a deep breath and looked up at his daughter's face. "Sarah, I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I never stopped thinking about you. I got lost for a while. I forgot who I was supposed to be." "You were supposed to be my father," she said, tears starting to well up in her eyes. "That's all you were ever supposed to be. Not perfect, not superhuman, just my dad." Mama Esther stepped forward and placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Are you ready?" Marcus nodded, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "Sarah, I want you to step back a little bit. I have something to show you." Looking confused but obedient, Sarah moved back several feet. The crowd had grown larger, and Marcus could see faces pressed with curiosity and hope. Some of them were other homeless people who had recognized him from the streets. Others appeared to be neighbors who had heard rumors about Mama Esther's healing abilities. With Keisha's help, Marcus transferred from his wheelchair to the camping chair they had brought. Mama Esther began her now familiar routine with the oils and cloth strips. But tonight everything felt different, more charged, more powerful, like electricity building before a thunderstorm. Your father, Mama Esther said to Sarah as she worked, has been learning that the body follows the heart. For 3 years, his heart believed he was broken beyond repair. This week, his heart learned to hope again. As the massage continued, Marcus felt the familiar tingling sensation spreading through his legs, but stronger than it had ever been before. He could actually feel Mama Esther's hands, could sense pressure and warmth and movement in ways that seemed impossible. Now, she said, stepping back, "Stand up, Marcus. Show your daughter who you really are." The moment felt suspended in time. Marcus could see Sarah's face, confused and hopeful and scared all at once. He could feel the attention of the crowd focused on him like a spotlight. Most of all, he could feel his own fear battling with determination. 3 years of accepting limitations warring with 1 week of discovering possibilities. He gripped the arms of the chair and pushed himself upward. His legs, which had been dead weight for so long, actually supported him. He stood there for a moment, wobbling but upright, looking at Sarah's astonished face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Dad, you're standing." "I'm not done yet," Marcus said, and then, incredibly, impossibly, he took a step forward. Then another. His gait was unsteady, and he had to concentrate intensely on each movement. But he was walking. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. But Marcus only had eyes for Sarah. He walked slowly but steadily toward her, covering the 10 feet between them in what felt like both an eternity and an instant. When he reached her, he opened his arms and she flew into them so hard he almost lost his balance. But he didn't fall. He stood there, holding his daughter while balancing on his own 2 feet, feeling more complete than he had since before the accident. "How is this possible?" Sarah sobbed into his shoulder. "The doctors said you'd never walk again." "The doctors were wrong," Marcus said simply. "Sometimes love really is stronger than medical diagnosis. Sometimes impossible things happen when we stop accepting limitations." Mama Esther appeared beside them, smiling with satisfaction. "The healing was always inside you, Marcus. You just needed to remember that you were worth saving." As father and daughter held each other in the middle of the celebrating crowd, Marcus realized that his real healing had begun not when his legs started working again, but when he had picked up the phone to call Sarah. The walking was miraculous, but the courage to love again despite his fear, that was the real magic. "I'm never leaving you again," he whispered to his daughter. "Whatever happens, whatever challenges come, we face them together. Promise?" Sarah asked, pulling back to look at his face. "Promise," Marcus said, and for the first time in 3 years, it was a promise he knew he could keep. Later that night, as the crowd dispersed and Sarah helped him back to his wheelchair for the journey home, Marcus looked for Mama Esther to thank her. But the mysterious healer and her granddaughter had vanished as suddenly as they had appeared in his life, leaving only the faint scent of herbs and the impossible gift of believing in miracles again. Marcus never saw Mama Esther again, but he didn't need to. She had given him everything he needed: the courage to hope, the strength to try, and the faith that sometimes the most broken things can become the most beautiful when touched by love.